Hi everyone, my name is Matt Gahn. I'm a PhD student at Northwestern. Today I'll be presenting on some research that we're currently working on, looking at the relationship between Wikimedia feature deployments and MediaWiki software engineering. Let's start with a simple model of a Wikimedia feature deployment. As a note, all of the case studies that we look at in this project are from feature deployments that happened before 2016. So our model and diagram of a feature deployment is kind of mapped onto a pre-2016 way of doing things. But we can imagine that the deployment processes and code development kind of run alongside each other, eventually converging when a feature is pushed out to the end user in a wide rollout. Of course, these two tracks are not as distinct as the diagram might suggest, and so one thing that we're interested in is how these two processes interact with each other, specifically how events and decision-making in the deployment process impacts contributions to MediaWiki libraries. There are a lot of populations that are very important to this as well. The Wikimedia Foundation has a lot of input into the Wikimedia deployment processes and a lot of input into MediaWiki code development as well. Users are obviously impacted whenever a new feature is pushed out to them in a wide rollout. And contributors have a lot of say in MediaWiki code development because they contribute a lot of code to the libraries. They have a little bit less say in the deployment processes, though I know that's changed a lot in the last 10 years. One thing that we're interested in is the relationship between users and contributors. Prior literature has shown that own use is a large motivator for open source contributions, and we're curious to know if presenting users with new features will spur contributions to the underlying repositories and libraries that those features are built in. And so to look at these different aspects of process and code development, we selected 3 different features that were pushed out to Wikimedia platforms. Right here we have our kind of comparison table for visual editor, HTTPS as default, and HTTP deprecation. We talk about this a little bit more in the extended abstract, so I won't spend too much time on it here, but I do want to highlight the difference in how long the feature deployments took from visual editor to the protocol features. Here we have a plot of commits to feature libraries during the time span of the feature deployment. So on the y-axis we have the count of weekly commits, on the x-axis we have the relative week. You can see that looking at relevant commits to MediaWiki core, there are just not that many contributions for the 2 protocol features. But looking at commits to visual editor, we see that for commits authored by both unaffiliated contributors as well as Wikimedia Foundation affiliated contributors, there are big spikes in activity immediately preceding any deployment milestones, whether that's an opt-in testing deployment or the kind of wide opt-out deployment. One thing to note is that with that really big spike in commits by unaffiliated contributors right before the opt-out deployment, those contributors had already been engaged with the project in the months prior. Those are not the first commits that those authors are making to the library. Those are kind of long-standing contributors to the visual editor library. Of course, writing code is not the only way to contribute to a software development process. So we also looked at the creation of new Fabricator tasks during these windows of feature deployment. And what we found is that similarly in Visual Editor, there's also a spike in new Fabricator tasks created. The spike actually starts right after it's announced that Visual Editor will get a wide opt-out release later in the month. And the spike is kind of largely made up of new contributors. So whereas the big spike in commits was made up of kind of established and already engaged contributors, this bump in activity is largely from new entrants to the space. And these new entrants shift the way that emotional language is used in the Fabricator discussions. On the y-axis we have a count of polarized words, which is a metric that we talk about a little bit more in the extended abstract. And on the x-axis we have the comment index in speaker history, which just means that if the index is 500, that is the comment author's 500th comment talking about Visual Editor on Fabricator. And we see that for kind of all groups, opt-out deployment really leads to a lot of increased emotional language, and that increase is especially pronounced for new entrants to the conversation. So we want to know what we're missing. We're curious to know what you're interested in, whether we're looking at the wrong characteristics of deployment processes, or if we should be looking at different aspects of contributions. We're really curious to know what your take is on the work that we're doing and how we can refine it to look at the things that really matter. For us, our next steps include finalizing that comparison that we're doing. You saw that there's some missing data. And so kind of wrapping up data collection and data analysis, as well as hearing your feedback and looking at different ways that we can continue to look at this problem. And then we want to refine any observations that we make over a larger sample of similar projects. So whether that's the Signal protocol and the Signal Messenger or kind of WebKit and Safari, we're curious to know if this generalizes or if any of these things that we're looking at are Wikimedia specific. So I'm happy to take any questions now and have a conversation right now, but also please reach out. My contact information is at the bottom of the slide. Thank you very much for listening to my presentation.